It's the Whiskey Wizard.
Hello and welcome to the Whiskey Wizard, where we say that whiskey making takes scientific knowledge, an artisan's skill and dedication, and a bit of the wizard's alchemy of light, air, earth, and fire. Okay, I'm going to talk about the chemistry of whiskey, and to be a bit more specific, the chemistry of whiskey aroma and flavor. This is something I've been planning and researching for some time. Maybe some of you didn't like the chemistry classes you had in school, but we hope to make this a bit more interesting for you, because after all, this has to do with whiskey, something we know you are quite fond of. Because look, you don't have to know all this stuff to enjoy a nice dram, sure. But on the Whiskey Roundtable show, we want to take things a bit farther so that our audience is equipped to make the most of their passion for whiskey. And the more you understand about what compounds are responsible for what flavors and aromas in whiskey, and how those compounds make their way into your favorite juice, the more you can define what it is that you like and don't like, and zero in on the styles and processes that put a spirit solidly into your taste wheelhouse. Come on, also, wouldn't it be nice to comment at your next tasting? Yeah, hey, I get a lot of apple on the palate. No doubt it's likely from ethyl hexanoate, certainly a byproduct of the yeast metabolism during the grain mash. Look, I've had skeptical people say things like, hey, can you really smell and taste all those flavors like cinnamon, pear, green apples, etc.? So while the short answer is yes, while admitting that there's some inherent subjectivity involved with smell and taste, which we've covered in the past, I want to show here that there is distinct chemistry responsible for these myriad flavors and aromas that we talk about. And I believe that certain combinations of these aromas and flavor compounds can create sensations responsible for some of the more exotic sensory inputs one might experience. The chemical makeup of whiskey flavor character originates during the distinct processes that we've discussed here previously in our series on the making of whiskey. Namely, 1, the grains and yeast in the mash and fermentation, 2, the distillation process, and last but not least, 3rd is barrel maturation. So let's take a look at each of these and talk about what they contribute in terms of those compounds responsible for the aromas and flavors we may be nosing or tasting in our favorite finished whiskeys. So in this first of our two-part series on the chemistry of whiskey, we'll look at what happens in the mash process to bring flavor and complexity to our finished whiskeys. As we said in our episode on whiskey making, the mash is where some argue that most of a whiskey's flavor complexity originates. In the mash, the complex starches in the grains are converted into a range of simpler sugars, such as maltose, glucose, sucrose, and fructose, which are subsequently converted by the distiller's specially selected yeast strains into ethanol, carbon dioxide, and a whole range of flavor-influencing compounds called congeners. These congeners can vary a lot depending on the yeast strain and as well by the specific grains used and their unique qualities. Fusel alcohols are also produced during fermentation. These are higher alcohols and are generally not desirable for taste, and some are poisonous. These will get removed in the heads or tails in the distillation run. Organic acids and esters are also produced by the yeast during fermentation. Some of these organic acids can combine with alcohols, including fusel alcohols, to form an additional range of esters. Esters are key in producing fruity, herbal, and floral notes in whiskey. These include isoamyl acetate, which provides banana notes, or methyl heptanoate for berries, propylbutanoate for light fruits like pear and pineapple, to a variety of citrus flavors such as orange peel from methyl octanoate and lemon zest coming from methyl hexanoate. When you taste floral essences or the distinct presence of roses, you're likely sensing beta-damascenone or phenyl ethyl alcohol or phenyl nonanoate. If you are getting cinnamon or cloves, that is likely from ethyl cinnamate or nuts, ethyl benzanoate. As a note, rye grains are more likely to produce more of these latter compounds in the mash. Propanoate would tend to provide pineapple or tropical fruit flavors. Different types of yeast strains and different grains produce different combinations of these esters. This is one reason why some whiskeys may display more banana or apples, while others yield more herbal, floral, or citrusy profiles. Four Roses Distillery has 5 different yeast strains that they use, which they call V, K, O, F, and Q. According to their master distiller, Brent Elliott, each of the 5 strains produces light fruit, high fruit, herbal, and floral aromatics, respectively. The best way to test the mash's ester and other congeners contribution is to nose the whiskey's new make spirit, or white dog, before it goes into the barrel. Here's where you can really gather those elements that you should still find there when sampling the finished product. I took a tour at Buffalo Trace a few years ago where Eddie Johnson, one of their longest tenured guides, let us nose and sample some of their white dog and then compare that to its finished whiskey. You could really still pick up those same aromatics and flavor notes, especially after adding a little water to it. Of course, the barrel contribution had layered its toasty richness on top, but it still made it really easy to tell what contributed what. Now I need to discuss Scottish whiskey specifically for just a second. As we discussed previously, when the malt is dried using peat fires, phenols are released from the peat fire, which flavor the malt and make their way through the whole spirit manufacturing process and into the finished spirit. The peatiness of Scotch whiskey is measured in parts per million phenol, as measured on the malt before mashing. Also, these phenols form cresols, such as guaiacol, that provide the remarkable smokiness. Some that contain bromine add that seaweed or oceanic quality. That is why peat from Islay, which is rich in bromine, adds to the seaside quality of Islay whiskeys. So the yeast, acting upon the converted grains in the mash, produces a great soup of flavor chemistry, available to add that richness to the finished spirit. And where the grains are smoked, we add a mix of phenolic compounds to the flavor profile as well. So you can see that there are so many aromas and flavors that connect to real chemical compounds that can find their way into our whiskey. This is the principal reason we spend so much time laboring over the scents and tastes that make a whiskey what it is. And thus far, we've only talked about half the stuff that brings complexity to each sip of that glass of glorious spirit. So that concludes part 1 of this edition on the chemistry of whiskey. Next time, we'll finish with more of the impact of distillation, barrel maturation, and barrel finishing on the chemical compounds responsible for giving our favorite drams all their unique sensory qualities. I just want to add that when we nose and taste a whiskey on the show, we try to be as honest and objective as we possibly can be about what we're sensing and tasting. Otherwise, what's the point? Who wants to parrot what some reviewer said in a magazine? Not me. Whiskey nosing and tasting is probably the most fun you can have conducting science. Yes, it's fun to later compare what we are getting on the notes or reviews from other experienced whiskey appreciators. But we do our best to avoid them influencing us before we sample. Keep in mind that it's a well-studied scientific fact that human taste and smell is not a smooth continuum, and that there are genetic differences that could explain why Big G is getting lemongrass while I'm clearly sensing pineapple. This is another of the many reasons that whiskey appreciation is such fun. That said, we're done for now, and this is Douglas Dunbar, the Whiskey Wizard for the Whiskey Roundtable. And
Hey, whiskey fans!
You can catch the Whiskey Wizard this Friday evening at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, live on the Whiskey Roundtable.
Grab a favorite pour and join in the fun as they inform us while tasting and evaluating a new whiskey selection on each show.
So tune in, hang out, and enjoy some laughs with the friends on this Friday's live Whiskey Roundtable YouTube videocast.
Cheers and Slán Java!